Hello everyone, it is I, the Witch of Paint. This week I am painting the Milky Way to see how well my new tape takes a painting that has been wet completely several times, and also because I have never painted the Milky Way before, so this should be a fun adventure at least for me, because I've never really painted a galaxy like this before in the sky and I kind of wanted to try it out. My sister actually suggested this when I was wondering out loud what I should paint for this video, and I was like, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do this. And this should be simple enough that I can just go in with my paint and everything without sketching it out first. It's just the Milky Way, right? So with my big kind of flat brush, I don't remember what these are called, but you know what I mean because you're seeing it after all. But I wet the whole paper with that before I take a smaller brush and add in colours. And once again I'm using my Van Gogh watercolour palette for this, and the colours I used are as follows: lemon yellow, azure yellow medium, permanent red light, quinacridone purple blue, ultramarine, indigo and Payne's grey. Look at that, I'm remembering to write down my colours for the benefit of you guys who want to know what colours I am using. Anyways, so I don't usually see the Milky Way because I spend my nights sleeping and I have a good enough camera to even capture it should I ever come across it. So I obviously scoured the internet for some references and kept an image up while I was painting to make sure that my painting looked like the Milky Way at least, or at least, you know, resemble it closely or close enough. It's my first painting of the Milky Way. I'm not going to get something accurate probably. Anyway, my first thought about how to do this was lay down some colours I see and then sprinkle some salt over it because the Milky Way looked quite bloomy to me, and I thought that for the first layer there should be some underlying blooms there. Underlying blooms. I thought that was going to be a great way to do it, but spoiler alert, did not go to plan at all, as most things do when I use salt. At this point you'd think I'd stop trying, but I think salt is still fun to work with, even if sometimes it causes me some issues. But anyways, while I am painting, why don't we take a little look at what humans used to explain the Milky Way with? The first story I can think of that I know that I don't need to Google is one where God had this sort of bag with stars that he used to carefully put the stars into the sky one by one. So like he had this bag and he was just taking stars and placing them in the sky. Obviously that's not what happened, but that's the story that I kind of remember from my childhood, I guess. Anyway, at some point I think something ripped the bag. I don't remember what. I could look the story up, but I don't feel like it. Something ripped the bag, a bunch of stars fell out and formed a big thing in the sky that we now know as the Milky Way. Also, when I looked up the references, I first realised how colourful the Milky Way actually is. Like, when I picture it, because the name Milky Way suggests something white, like just white, but then in the pictures there were all sorts of colours like oranges and purples and pinks and blues. You've got these dark sort of splashes in there. Nothing about this reminds me of milk. So my thought then was, why do we call it the Milky Way if it's not actually white like milk? And once again, we have Greek mythology to blame for this. Apparently, Zeus decided to attempt to let Heracles, a baby that he has had with another woman because he's just that terrible of a husband. He decided to let Heracles to have some of Hera's breast milk while she was asleep because, let's face it, if she knew who this baby was, she would never agree to this consciously. So, Zeus is gonna be an absolute creep. After all, Heracles is not Hera's child, because Zeus loves having affairs with mortals. But Hera woke up, realized she's breastfeeding some random infant, and pushed him away, and some of the milk sort of spurted out and fell across the sky, and hence why we here in Europe call it the Milky Way. Even though it technically does look like milk, I suppose the Greek gods just have very colourful, glowy milk. Another different variant of this was that Heracles was abandoned by his mortal parents, and Athena found him and she brought him to Hera because Athena wasn't the breastfeeding type, so she just was like, "Hey, Hera, how about you feed this random kid I found in the woods?" And Hera was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." But then Heracles bit her and she pushed him away because it hurt. And that's when the milk kind of spilled into the sky. Basically a very similar story with the same end result. Our galaxy receiving the name of the Milky Way. Humanity is truly something, guys. Anyways, I ended up on Wikipedia again. I know it's not, the best source, but it kind of just sort of happened that I ended up there again. But Wikipedia has a number of different myths, just slightly touched on and kind of like in a one sentence described. And because I was curious about what Irish myths were about the Milky Way, and I couldn't really find anything, at least not from the titles in my Irish fairy tale book, I kind of had to resort to the internet a little bit. I will have the sources linked down below just so you kind of know what I was looking at while researching. I know it's not the most in-depth thing, I'm just kind of looking around a little bit, but anyways, in Irish mythology the Milky Way is called many different names. Sometimes they'd call it something along the lines of the Way of the White Cow or Road of the White Cow, and apparently it has been regarded as a reflection of the river Boyne. Is that how you pronounce it? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, but it's sacred and connected to the goddess Boyne. And according to some stories, she approached the river Boyne and it overflowed. Small warning, it gets a little triggery now, because Irish mythology can get like that sometimes. So if you'd rather not, just stop. Don't listen for a moment. Essentially, she was caught by this flood, washed down the river, and into the sea where she drowned. And meanwhile, her lapdog Dabila was just casually turned into the Rockabill Islands. Definitely a tragic creation story here. Happens with Irish myths and fairy tales. I mean, I have a book where there is an entire section on tragic stories. I've stayed away from those for the moment because tragedy. Anyways, there are loads of other names for it in Irish mythology, and I have left a small article down below for you to check out if you want to know more. But let's talk about my painting a little bit more. After the salt had caused some wanted and some unwanted blooms, I attempted to paint over it again to make the blooms a little less noticeable overall, but just still be kind of there underneath and make everything look a little, bloomy, except for those big blooms that I didn't really want and kind of wanted to get rid of because they went outside of the boundaries of the galaxy itself. Yeah, that kind of sort of went a little bit wrong there with the salt, but the rest of the salt thing was just fine. I should have just, I think I might have used a little bit too much water in that area. It's sort of in the areas where the water kind of collected and pooled. I should have perhaps used a paper towel to draw out the water there. That's just something for me to remember for the next time I attempt something like this. Which is hopefully going to be sometime soon, because I really enjoyed painting this galaxy. Even though I had a couple of struggles, but it still turned out really nice. Anyways, the big blooms were still a problem for me, so I attempted to just kind of paint over them with darker paints, and in the bit where the galaxy was supposed to be. I put a paper towel to just kind of draw some of the paint out, but not all of it, sort of like pale the colours a little bit so that it's not too in the face, because the colours on the pictures of the references that I used were kind of paler, so I had to, you know, make sure I got that right. It did actually work out quite well, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. And even though in the end I don't manage to completely cover up that one bloom, it sort of still looks a bit like lightning, and the other bloom is sort of just vaguely visible, but it's not as noticeable as the other one. That sort of looks like lightning in the picture, but overall the painting is fine. I should not be, you know, thinking so badly of it. And in the sort of foreground, I decided to paint a few rows of mountains with fog in between them. I just saw a few images with something like that, and I thought it looked really cool and mystical, so I decided to put it in. But I'm not so sure if I should have done them in rows. Maybe I should have tried to, like, do a couple of, like, peaks. I don't know, that's something to figure out if I try to do this again. It's just, it looks a little weird with rows, you know? Yeah, I'll have to redo that at some point. I'll have to redo this and make it a little bit better, I suppose. But this was the first time I did something like this, and I don't draw foggy mountains a lot, so. But once the painting has dried again, I make sure to add some of those darker patches that the Milky Way has in indigo, and then I block off the bottom half of the painting and splatter some opaque white across the top half. And I then block off the painting on either side of the Milky Way as well, and sprinkle in some metallic watercolours for that extra little bit of shine. I kind of only wanted the metallic colours to be on the Milky Way itself. So I've got some, I think it was, these are the colours that I didn't write down. I didn't write down what metallic colours I used. It's just the Van Gogh metallic watercolours. I'm going to have to remember this for the future, to also write down the metallic watercolours I use, and not just, you know, the non-metallic colours. Well, that's something for future me to remember. But after removing the papers, I take some opaque white to add snow to the mountains, because apparently I only do snowy mountains. Mainly because I always see mountains with snow. I can't have mountains without snow. It's just, they're so high up, so kind of makes sense that there's always snow on top of the mountains that I paint. At least to me. Maybe there's mountains there that don't always have snow on them in some part, at least, a little bit at least. But technically I just kind of wanted an excuse to practice drawing snowy mountains. And so here we are. And then I very, very slowly and carefully remove the tape. This was a little stressful for me as well, because it's kind of stuck quite well to the paper, and I was so scared to rip it and ruin some parts of the painting. But it gave me a clean line, for one, and two, it didn't rip into the painting, even though some of the paper did come off. So overall, this was pretty okay. It was still pretty nerve-wracking though, because I was so scared when I noticed that some of the paper had come off and stuck to the tape itself. That was really nerve-wracking, but I'm so glad that it actually didn't rip the painting itself, and that's all that matters, I suppose. So I definitely recommend the Nihon Artist tape. That was definitely a better experience than I've had with either masking tape or that purple tape that I used usually for my paintings. I'm still gonna have to use these up, so, you know, expect to see some purple tapes in some of the videos. I've got a lot of tape to use up. Oof, it's got a stack on my desk. Anyways, all I gotta do now is sign the painting, and then I'm done, and we can look at the final result together. I am so happy with this painting, considering that, this is my first ever time painting a galaxy. I think I did a really good job. The colours are nice, and even though some of those stars could be smaller and the mountains maybe shouldn't be in rows as they are, yeah, I think this is a really pretty painting altogether. I'm proud of myself. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe to all the fun stuff. Check out my socials and my Twitch as well, down below in the description. I'm the Witch of Paint, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye!